Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Let's Talk Network. Today we are talking Utah football. Obviously, the headliner of today is Utah's big move to the Big 12, and we are going to cover that in depth today. So the first question that I have to ask for you guys is, why did this move happen?
I think there's a variety of reasons. I mean, it's coming to light recently as like around a year ago, Pac-12 commissioner, they declined a deal from ESPN for 30 million a year per team, which is horrible. And I think a little bit of that was they were overvaluing a little bit maybe what they were going to be able to get from a TV deal, and that overvaluation and then just being so stagnant and not locking teams in. Teams wanted somewhere that had stability. And so that's why you see Big 10, teams leaving for the Big 10, teams leaving for the Big 12. It's these teams, they need to look out for themselves, these colleges. They need to keep funding their athletics, and they need to know that they have a commissioner who's going to take care of them and that they're going to have like a media deal.
That might all be well and true, but let's be real. It's because USC is selfish.
Yeah.
I just think it's the fact like them when the Big 12, when Texas and Oklahoma were leaving to the SEC, when that was announced, the Pac-12 had the opportunity to take on some teams, take on Kansas State, Oklahoma State, etc., Texas Tech, and USC just denies it and then dips out after a few years of losing to small old Utah. And it's kind of annoying, truthfully, to think about. It makes me a little bit upset that we get to this amazing spot in the Power 5 that took us in, and it's gone. And it's a little heartbreaking, truthfully.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that contributed to this move, Utah going to the Big 12. I think that inept leadership pretty much from day one in the Pac-12 is to blame. I think that, universities looking out for themselves and kind of looking for the money above everything else is to blame. The media partners, Fox basically orchestrated this entire Big Ten thing with USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington all leaving to the Big Ten. Fox basically did that whole thing. So I think there's a lot of factors that led us to this day, but basically bad leadership, incompetence, and arrogance, frankly, led to the death of, one of the oldest conferences in college football with some of the greatest college football history that's just going down the drain now.
Well, sports history altogether, the most championships out of any conference ever. Yeah. Not just talking about football, talking about every sport. And so it's sad to see that such a powerhouse in the world of sports is gone now. It's just
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the teams left behind. Obviously, the Big 10 swallows up 4, the Big 12 swallows up 4, and 4 are left behind, those being Oregon State, Washington State, Cal, and Stanford. I really, really feel for Oregon State and Washington State specifically. They didn't deserve to be relegated like that. They didn't deserve to be left behind. They're great programs that the fans love and that, deserve to be in a Power 5 conference, or Power 4, I guess, now.
Yeah. Dude, the Oregon State one especially just crushes me. This is a team that historically maybe has been a little bit worse. They've definitely been down for the past decade. But seeing them fight back, the fan support, the fans stuck through it all. Great coaching hires, just working their way back up. And then it's horrible, but right after the new renovation for their stadium to make it like a respectable, nice college football stadium, like many millions of dollars spent on that renovation. Now it's like next year, where are they going to be playing football even? Are they even going to be in a Power 4 conference?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, they remind me of Utah, kind of a school not in the biggest media market, not with, the richest donors or alumni, not with, all of the benefits that come from being in LA. Yeah. But they made smart decisions. They plugged away. They didn't skip steps. They recruited underrated talent, and they coached the hell out of them. And now they're in competition for the Pac-12. So it's really heartbreaking to see them go this way.
Well,
Mhm.
Oregon State very well can go out and win the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's like very likely.
The most important aspect of college athletics is the football program. It basically, just the money generated from that funds all the other sports. How many Power 5 teams do you guys even think are better than Oregon State? Do you think Oregon State's football team is better than 75% of them?
Probably this
Especially
year.
this year.
At least, yeah. I mean, at least 75%, I would say.
Yeah, it's just
And it's
unfortunate that really, really well-run programs like Oregon State are left out, where programs like Northwestern or Rutgers
Yeah.
are given a golden parachute simply because of
Maryland.
the location. Yeah, the location that their university resides.
Mhm.
That's really heartbreaking.
Exactly. Because, I mean, exactly like you're talking about. Some schools are just bailed out by location or have just been in the conference. The Big Ten has quite a few of those, as you mentioned. And then even schools like, obviously USC has a very rich history of success. They've done a lot. But, like, dude, really? Like, they haven't been all that impressive in the Pac-12 era. And now they're just, like, bailed out to the big... Same with UCLA. Especially UCLA fits that.
Well, if UCLA wasn't in LA, then
There's no way
they
would
would
take it.
no one
I
would
mean,
even think of them.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like, yeah.
And it's just to think about like the other programs left behind with Washington State, Cal, and Stanford. Obviously, Washington State is probably the number 2 team to think about here, is because they were very good for a long time. They had the offensive firepower to hang with anyone, especially in the days with Gardner Minshew. They really just they've been struggling the past few years, so that kind of hurts them. But they're another team that, it sucks to see them to be left behind. The Oregon State and Washington State fans, like, we feel for you, because I can't even imagine as a fan of football to be left behind, especially on the up and up like Washington State and Oregon State are seeing these last few years.
Yeah, I think that Stanford and Cal are ultimately going to be fine. Stanford has an $18 billion endowment. They're going to be totally fine money-wise. Cal, maybe it's a little different, but they don't really invest that heavily into athletics. And so I'm not sure leadership at that school would be that sad to see athletics go away. I'm sure there would be some Cal fans that would be really just devastated, but maybe not the attitude of the university leaders. So I think they'll ultimately be okay. Great academic schools.
I agree.
They'll probably land on their feet.
Yeah, it's not like there's much of a fan base for Stanford or Cal athletically. Like, I've been to their games. The stadium's empty. I think it's like you're saying, the leadership at that school, they really care about academics. Football's nice. It's awesome. But at the same time, I just don't think it matters that much to them.
Well, just the name of Stanford alone will keep them in conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
For additions to Power 4 conferences for the next decade. They could be 1-12 or 1-11 for the rest of time, and people will still consider them just because of their history and their location and the money that they can bring in, especially when they're good.
Oh, and recruits will always consider them because the value of a Stanford education is just massive. So Stanford is going to be completely fine. Okay, let's move on from that. A little bit of a depressing talk, and let's talk about Utah's move to the Big 12 and what it actually means. Obviously, Utah has a really strong program right now. They have a lot of depth. They have talent all over the roster. But what should we be expecting year one in the Big 12, or maybe the first few years in the Big 12? What are you guys expecting?
It's hard to put an expectation against a lot of teams that we either haven't played or play extremely infrequently. But based on recruiting rankings, we do barely edge TCU out a little bit as the best recruiter in the Big 12 for the past few years. I mean, you have to think Utah is at the very least competitive for the Big 12 championship their first year.
I think they should be one of the favorites year one. I think, especially with how the program is projecting for the next few years. Obviously there's big question marks after Cam Rising leaves for the quarterback position, and had to fill that shoe. But every other position is just going to continue to increase in strength. And so, hey, Utah gets one competent quarterback, boom, they're right back into it.
Yeah,
It's just
the
one of those
biggest
things.
thing.
It's one of those things where it's like when Utah, like it's all talked about how power out of conference play Utah struggled. Well, Big 12 is now going to be their conference, and Utah will be successful. And so I think, like Landon said, at the very least, they're going to be competitive for the championship for the next 5 years. I think the only question mark is Witt staying that long.
Yeah, for me, again, the biggest question mark is the quarterback position. Obviously, losing Rising, someone that you know can win at the highest level, can win in those big games. I think that is the key part. But all in all, the roster stacks up with any that's going to be in the Big 12 next year. I'd be pretty shocked if the preseason poll came out next year and Utah wasn't in the top 5. That would be a little surprising to me.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, I think that they probably will have a decent shot at winning the Big 12 championship. Obviously, we'll have a lot more info on this after we see how this season plays out. We see how teams in the Big 12 compete. We see what their rosters look like, what their situations at quarterback look like, and maybe we see what our situation at quarterback looks like, because Rising has every year missed 1 or 2 games for, little injuries or big injuries, and so we might get a little glimpse into the future here of, what we can expect for next year.
There's a couple things that I could see next season that would help me be a lot more confident in predicting how Utah's going to perform. If we say have a second string or third string quarterback perform extremely well, say Nate Johnson, wow, he's playing incredibly. Maybe Brandon Rose is playing incredibly. Who knows who it could be? If they're playing extremely solid, that would make me more confident. And if we're able to beat Baylor and beat them pretty handily, those two things together, I'd be ready to guarantee a Utah conference championship first year.
Yeah, I think that with kind of the talent level we have, the thing that'll be sticking out to me most that I think will translate right away is the defense. Yeah, I think Utah's defense, probably year 1, will be the class of the Big 12. I think offense is where it's going to be dicey. I think we'll come in right away as the best defense in the Big 12. We're recruiting well. We have a lot of young talent there, and we're probably not going to lose too many people to the draft next year. We'll probably lose a few, but I think that we have the depth to be able to replace that. So I think looking in, we're number 1 defense coming in, and offense, if we could be top half, we'll be a contender. If we can't be top half, then we'll see how it goes.
And something that isn't talked about enough, Utah is one of the deeper teams in the country, especially on the offensive side. Our offensive line is stacked to the top with talent ready to go right now. We have true freshmen lining up to start day 1 this year. We have our running back room is elite. We have 4, 5, 6 4-star running backs on the roster, and guys that won't even touch the ball will be one of the best running backs in the conference to come next year. And with that incredible defense, that's going to continue to be improved throughout the years with young guys like Lander Barton, like Sione Vaki, like Smith Snowden, CJ Blocker, these guys that are coming in that are freshmen right now. Utah is going to be a team to watch. And, I think it was Tanner who said, or Landon, it's not top 5. They're coming in and they're not top 5. I would be shocked if they're not top 3. It's one of those things where we were the big add from the Pac-12 teams. And, back-to-back Pac-12 championships, you can't really take that away from Utah. And they're going to come in and they're going to compete for the Big 12 championship right away in my eyes.
Yeah, so I think we all expect them to be, if not maybe the top team, at least one of the top teams going into next year in the Big 12 in 2024. Let's move on to something a little that's pretty related, which is recruiting. Recruiting is obviously the lifeblood of college sports. I heard a stat the other day that 72% of games are won by the team that recruits high school better. So the team that's higher in the recruiting rankings wins 72% of the games. So I think that is a pretty key stat, honestly. There's another one that I look at pretty regularly that I think is really important. It's called it's 247 Sports, and it's their talent composite ranking, which basically it's not a one-off recruiting class. It's a compilation of all the talent that you have on your roster from multiple classes, people who are on their roster. Utah comes in at number 33. The only Big 12 team above them is TCU at 32.
Yeah,
so one spot above them.
Up.
Yeah, it's almost identical rankings. And this is for 2022. So with Utah's 2023 class coming in, they actually narrowly edge out TCU once that talent is taken into account for their better recruiting class.
Because we are next year going to the Big 12. So I would say Utah's the best recruiter in the Big 12 as of now.
Yeah, so at worst, it's basically a toss-up versus TCU. And Utah's talent composite will be either number 1 or number 2 going into the Big 12 next year. And so I think that's a key stat for Utah.
Well,
how do you guys think recruiting will be affected positively or negatively with the move to the Big 12?
I mean, it's hard to say. We're going to lose out on California, which we've recruited pretty well. We will open some avenues into Texas, though, which we already do recruit decently. But I don't know. I mean, being completely real with you, I do think we will have slightly worse recruiting. I just think that losing out on some of those destinations from the pack, I think we lose some ground there. But I don't think it will be a big drop. I don't think we'll be positive, though.
Something that is important to talk about is Utah's never had the recruiting advantage.
Yeah.
For maybe the last few years they've had it. Utah's always been the team that's been the middle to the bottom half of the Pac-12. They've never been the top dogs. 2023 was the only year that Utah was in the top 5 or top 3. I meant in recruiting. I don't even think they were in the top 3. This is off the top of my head. But if Utah being 1 or 2 in recruitment every single year in a conference, that's scary to think about for other teams because Utah's always been routinely improved and routinely outplayed teams that have better recruits than them. We've seen it against Oregon, we've seen it against USC, we've seen it against Stanford, we've seen it against UCLA. Utah has routinely beat them, especially the last few years. And if Utah isn't at that recruitment disadvantage that they have been, I mean, the sky's the limit for them, especially in the Big 12 there.
That is my big reason why I think recruiting will actually be better for us in the Big 12 than it was in the Pac-12. Even if it's by comparison, I do think recruiting will be better. Instead of being the 4th, 5th, 6th recruiter, like Ethan said, we're now the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. Which is a big jump. I think that we've made enough inroads in California and we have enough relationships with the coaches at those high schools that I think we will still recruit California. Maybe not to the level and effect we currently do, but I think that slack will get picked up by recruiting Texas better. I also think that never mind, that's the end of my thought. Someone else can go.
I mean, for me, it really all depends on how Witt decides to do. Because if Coach Whittingham stays for the next 5 years, I think Utah's recruiting is just going to continue to increase. But if he wants to go out and kind of take his experience in the Pac-12 and run, which I wouldn't blame him because he'll probably just end happy and be the best coach Utah's ever had.
Yes, that reminds me of my second point actually. My second point was the access to the college football playoff. I think that with the 12-team playoff, Witt is obviously going to want to give that a test ride. I think he's been desperate to get into the 4-team playoff, and Utah has not yet done that because it's insanely hard to do. I think he's going to want to stick around for a few years at least to try to get into the 12-team playoff. And I think the fact that, we kind of see consolidation of brands in the Big Ten and the SEC, maybe some of those recruits that, are going to be on, Wisconsin, or they're going to be on in the SEC, maybe Missouri, or maybe Ole Miss. Maybe some of those will, consider Utah. Because Utah would have a much clearer path to the college football playoff. Utah would have a much clearer path to kind of national recognition, I guess, playing on the biggest stages. And so I think that is a possibility. If recruits see Utah as the top dog in the Big 12, then they might, flock to Utah for that opportunity to make the playoff and that opportunity to get recognized.
I do agree that there could be a little bit of a snowball effect, like what you guys are talking about, because if we come into the Big 12 and we're maybe the best team or the second best team, the snowball of that success, and say we're putting people in the league, people are getting drafted, we're going to the college football playoff. Recruits see that. They want to go to a team that's winning. They want to go to a team that's going to get them recognition. They want to go to a team that's going to develop them. If we can make a name for ourselves as the best team in the Big 12 at those things, there is a chance that that recruiting can kind of just snowball and just keep going upwards.
It'd be big, man. It'd be huge.
I think that is why the first few years in the Big 12 are so critical. I think that establishing yourself, getting that recruiting pipeline going, and, you know, getting kind of your brand out there to a new market is key, because you'll be able to expand into areas where people may not have seen you. And so I think that that could potentially impact recruiting.
Truthfully, I think Utah in the first 5 years needs to get into the Big 12 championship game at least 3 times. For it,
I agree with you,
because it's one of those things where you're going to be competing to be that top dog, and then you're going to be also having the light shine on you for the longest time. So I think that's a big thing for Utah.
Okay,
I think that will continue to help them.
Let's talk a little bit about something that we've kind of touched on, and that's college football playoff access. Obviously, starting next year, it's a 12-team playoff with 6 automatic bids, which lasts for 2 years. 2025 and 2026 will have 6 automatic bids. That's already been agreed upon, even if the Pac-12 doesn't exist. So we could potentially have 2 G5 automatic slots. I think that this format is much better than the current format. I think that even if it ends with the same Final Four, more teams get to enjoy that experience. And I do think eventually the 12-team will lead to more parity. You might not see that right away. Maybe Georgia runs it for the first few years, or Alabama or Ohio State, your usual suspects. But I think over time, as recruits see other teams as options for national championship contention, I do think parity will increase.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Well, you see in March Madness for basketball, you know, obviously you got the teams that run recruitment like Duke, Kentucky's, UNC's, Gonzaga's, etc. We also have teams that are coming in as 16 seeds, beating those big boys. And I'm not saying, like, obviously it's a little different with the 1 year and done. College football, you have to stay for 3 years. So those teams have more time to develop and become those powerhouses that nobody can stop. But I think, like Tanner said, the more parity there is, the more opportunities for those big dogs to lose to good teams. It's going to be better for the sport. Everybody loves the underdog story.
I think that there instantly will be more parity once the 12 team is instituted, because it's just winning multiple college football playoff games against quality opponents. It's hard, even for the best teams. Like, seriously, you saw what happened to Alabama last year. That's a quality team. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to LSU. They had to have last-second goal line stands to beat teams. It's like the good teams, yeah, they probably will win that game. But I also think there's a really, really good chance that the top 4, when it comes down to it for the college football playoff, is going to have at least one team that would not have been selected in a 4-team playoff.
I agree with you. I think
minimum,
that's almost guaranteed. Yeah, I think that's very likely.
I think it's more likely that 2 teams that wouldn't have been selected are in, to be honest.
Well, and it's just the fact, like, you see teams like Tulane beating those USC teams. You see back in the day in 2008, Utah beating Alabama pretty handedly. If that 12-team playoff was around in 2008, Utah could be national champions right now. Or Boise State or stuff like that. Maybe Cincinnati gets a better lay and has a chance to beat them, or the UCFs of the world. You know, those group of 5s that are dang good and play really good opponents and beat them in bowl games. You know, why not give them a better chance to go and be the national championship? Because they're never going to be in the format they are now. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a hot take regarding Utah specifically and their access to the college football playoff. I think before this move to the Big 12, I was in massive favor of the Pac-12, finding some way to stick together. And now that now that Utah is in the Big 12, I see a real opportunity for them. If Utah had maybe, randomly gotten that Big 10 invite that there was reports that they were looking for, they would probably be in a worse position to make the playoff than they are currently.
They 100% would be.
Yeah, so getting by teams like Ohio State, Oregon, USC every single year just isn't feasible for a team that recruits like Utah, who's not one of the big dogs, who does more with less. Like, you can occasionally get that upset, but it's not going to be a consistent thing. And so I think that actually Utah football-wise is probably in a better scenario than maybe even an Oregon or a Washington that went to the Big Ten, because now they have easier access to the college football playoff. They have maybe less guaranteed losses on their schedule, I would say, as far as, if you have to travel to Ohio State or Michigan.
I would say we have no guaranteed losses on our schedule in the Big 12. I think
I agree. I agree with that. I think they could win every single game.
Playing at Ohio State, if we were in the Big Ten, that's almost a guaranteed loss. Same with Michigan. If Penn State's good, Penn State's at that level.
Yeah,
having less of those is massive.
And so even going to Wisconsin, those teams they're good at home, especially.
And so while we definitely miss out on the security of the Big Ten, the financial aspect of the Big Ten, and maybe the prestige that the Big Ten would bring, Utah finds itself in a very, very favorable, purely football place.
Yeah.
It's going to be good football for the fans to watch. It's going to be hopefully a lot of wins, a lot of games that are close. Utah will never be completely overmatched in a game, and it could be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, leading off of that, I predict there's going to be quite a few upset fans from the Big Ten and SEC. I think Utah will be in the playoffs basically every year, perennially, because I think in the Big Ten, with the recruiting we have compared to other big teams in relative, I think there's going to be a lot of years that 10-2 is our floor. Which is crazy as that is to say. I think there's going to be a lot of... You mean in the Big 12? In the Big 12, sorry. I think there's going to be a lot of years that 10-2 is like a pretty reasonable floor.
If Utah gets Colorado, BYU...
Yeah.
Sorry, go.
And I was just going to say that's easily... Obviously, 10-2 is going to be making the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
Utah, year one, gets Colorado, Arizona, the Arizona schools, and BYU. That's 4, I think, obvious wins.
Exactly. It's like we've already been
I don't think that's guaranteed, though.
Well, it's if Utah, not like saying that's how the schedule is going to pay out. But if you get those schools, it's obvious. That's 4 wins right away in conference play.
I don't think that's as obvious as you're making it sound, but I do think that we would have a good shot to win all those.
Maybe not those Arizona schools definitely are showing up, but it's one of those things where it's hard to see Utah not being competitive when it comes to that, and being able to have an opportunity to go to the playoff year in year out is gonna be awesome. There's a reason why those schools like the 2000s USC's, the 90s Miami's were so good. It's because they were so good for so long that people wanted to go play for them. It's why Alabama's so dang good right now. It's why Georgia's going to be so good for the next 5-10 years, because they win.
Yeah, let me ask you guys a question. Would you rather be Utah or would you rather be Vanderbilt? Utah is the best recruiter, or at least one of the top recruiters in the Big 12. Vanderbilt is near the bottom of the SEC. Vanderbilt gets double the media money that Utah gets, but they'll probably win 3 games a year. Whose position would you rather be in?
Utah, of course, all day.
As a fan, Utah. As a program, I'm not sure, just because that money is enticing.
I would still say Utah as a program as well, because I'm sure Utah is doing a lot more ticket sales, merch sales,
Good point.
marketing, all that other stuff. So I would still go Utah, even financially.
Yeah, I agree. And so I'm just saying maybe this move isn't as bad as some people are making it out to be. There is still some serious upside with this move, I think.
Well, obviously, missing out on 20 million from 30 to 50 from the Big 12, Big 10 is huge. But like Utah's always done, they've done more with less. Why not continue
We'll make
that
up for
trend?
it with college football playoff appearances.
Okay. Let us go to another related question. We'll kind of finish out the Big 12 talk, and then we'll talk about this season for Utah. So let's talk about the ideal scheduling format that we would want in the Big 12. Obviously, Ethan mentioned a thing where there might be pods, or there's a lot of different options. So what do you guys think would be your ideal scenario for scheduling?
We've talked about this a little bit, but I think we like protected rivals. At least you and I do, Tanner. I like that
agree.
because you do have those marquee games of teams that you feel like you need to play each year. But at the same time, the Big 12 is a big conference, and I don't want to play like the same 8 teams every single year. Like, I don't want it to be like a 5-year period where I haven't played every team in the Big 12, because that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that with divisions, that would happen. And so that's why divisions for me are probably by far the thing that I don't want to see. I don't want to see an East-West. I don't want to see a North-South. Because with 16 teams, 8 teams in each division, there goes 7 of your games every year. You only get to play 2 teams from the other division. And that's just ridiculous. And so I am not in favor of that at all as far as divisions go.
Well, it's just like the fact Utah's last time they played Washington at home was 2019. Last time Utah's
it was
played
2018.
2018.
Yeah, 2019 we played at Washington.
Yeah, and last time we played Cal was 2018. You know, it's one of those things where it's like,
and that's a 12
you want to play those, and you want to play those. You want to play those teams not for the fact, one, it just creates better environments for the whole conference, and then 2, you know, those big programs, the programs like the TCUs, the Baylors, the Utahs, they want to play the programs that are going to be struggling to start off when it helps them out. And 2, there's a reason why like Alabama and Georgia are always going to be so good. It's because they never play each other. They're never going to have to worry about, oh, I'm never going to have to play Georgia till the championship game. And so they can go roll their division, roll their conference, and then they'll play Georgia here. I think it's one of those things where for the Big 12 to be considered elite, and if they want to be elite, they're going to have to do something where they can protect their top schools.
I think that probably the second best option for me would be pods, which would be there's 4 pods of 4, and you play each team in your pod every year, which probably for Utah, the pod would probably be Arizona State, Arizona, and BYU is what I would predict, as well as along with Utah to make up the 4-team pod, which that would probably be the second best because then you'd only have 3 guaranteed scheduled games every single year, and you could rotate the other 6 with different pods. So I think that would probably be the second best option. What do you guys think about the pod model?
Pods wouldn't be bad. I wouldn't be too upset if the pods were introduced. Obviously, it just seems like a little bit worse version of the protected rivals, but you don't run into as much of the situation where it's been 5 years and you just barely played everyone. So I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't be super happy or like sad about it either, but I think it would be okay.
I think pods are the most likely thing to happen. It just geographically it makes sense for most teams. Obviously, you got the West Virginias and the UCFs; they're kind of just out there. But I think I don't know which one I prefer. Truthfully, I think I prefer protected rivals just because it just creates more parity, which, as we discussed earlier, is always good. But the pods kind of still implement that parity that we want, but also gives you some more backbone in some rivalries that would be really cool to see. Like, I would love to continue the rivalry with ASU that has continued to grow throughout the years.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ethan that pods is probably most likely. I think that with people talking a lot about student athletes and how much they're going to travel. It would be good to know that you have those games in your back pocket that you're not going to have to travel that far for. So I do think that is likely what's going to happen. But yeah, I would prefer protected rivals where only the most important games get played. Like maybe Utah only has one protected rival, and that's BYU, and that's the only team we play every single year. Or maybe you add ASU or Colorado to that list, or any combination.
Exactly.
Yeah. As a fan, I personally like as much randomness and as much coverage of the conference as possible in the schedule.
That's what I prefer as well. It's like I don't want to play the same teams every single year. I want it to be random. I want a good view of every team in the conference.
Yeah.
I want a year where we're going to West Virginia and Florida and Cincinnati, in a year where we're staying in Texas for a month and a half. It'd be fun to see.
Yeah.
I'd like that too. I would like just a lot of interesting games where the schedule doesn't feel the same every year. Because I feel like I've had that trouble in the Pac-12 where with the divisions, the schedule feels the same every single year.
Yeah, it did kind of, because you had the Arizona game, you had the ASU game, you had the Colorado game, obviously, happening at the end of each season. You had your
UCLA
USC
and
game,
USC.
you had your USC game. It's just, you kind of knew exactly what to expect. It's just the weeks that changed in like home or away.
Yeah.
And then
it's like in Utah always...
like teams from the North Division, Pac-12 North. It's like, oh, who are we going to get this year? Are we going to play Washington or Oregon? Like,
Are we going to play Stanford? Are we going to play Cal? Are we going to play Wazoo? Oregon State?
It's just one of those things where Utah
just
always
had it split, and just we're playing half from the South, half from the North.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not in favor of divisions.
In those scenarios, Utah always got like the short end of the stick. They always got USC right after USC
this year,
week.
dude, we got the short end.
The reason we always got the short end was because of USC. USC said they had to play Stanford and Cal every single year because they were other California schools, and so USC would not allow. They had to play Stanford and Cal
every year. Think about that.
That's why we almost never played Cal, is because they already had so many opponents from the South that like we just couldn't fit in.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it just every single time I hear more about USC, I just like them even more.
Okay, so I think that we've talked a little bit about the Big 12 and kind of the move and what we're expecting. I think overall it's probably the best option for Utah, and I think that there's some really great potential in this move. What do you guys think?
I agree. Not much to add.
Okay, then let's get into this season. Let's talk about kind of fall camp, and let's talk about what we're expecting the first few weeks of the season. So obviously, the big thing hanging over everyone is Cam Rising's health. Coach Whittingham was recently on a podcast, and he said that it was 50-50 whether Cam played at Florida. What do you guys think about that?
I think there's truth to that, but at the same time, I think if Cam was 100% healthy right now, Whit would have said 50-50. And if there was no chance he was going to play at all, he would have said 50-50.
Yeah, he never gives away anything.
I don't think we really can predict it. Whit's not going to give away anything. I highly doubt we get anything more substantial than maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. I completely agree. We have to go off how we're feeling about it and what the feel around the program is, because those people around the program do often have inside information, but maybe they can't share it. It seems like I know it's a small sample, but Pac-12 media days, Cam's walking around, there's no brace. He seems confident, energetic. He didn't seem hobbled at all. He's playing pickleball. He's hitting it between his legs, going up and down. For me personally, I think he's going to play week 1. I think everything's a smokescreen that's been going on.
Oh, how I hope that's the truth. Because now, obviously, we got news today, which is August 12th, that Brandon Rose is injured as well.
And so he was some sort of liver injury. I think I saw that on Twitter.
I've heard spleen laceration, kidney lacerations. I've heard a lot.
Yeah,
so it's one of those things where he could be out for a while. And
I wouldn't count on him being ready anymore.
Did you guys see the video that Utah football put out? They showed him getting splattered. I guarantee you it was that hit. because he got totally just clobbered. And so, yeah, as far as Cam's availability, I just have such a hard time seeing him playing week 1. I really do. I think that it's just such a quick turnaround for an ACL, where Brant Keithy tore his ACL in October, and he's still not even back to full participation in Utah's practice. And that was October. That was 3 months before Rising tore his ACL. And so, for me, I know that we've seen him walking around, we've seen him doing a few things, and I really, really hope he plays, but I'm expecting him to miss at least the first game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The average ACL...
You go.
Like, the average ACL recovery time is like 8 to 9 months, but like it says, some people have recovered within 6. And so it is cutting it really close for Cam if he's going to that 6-month recovery mark, I believe. Well, actually, no, it's kind of the point. It's about 8 months now.
But what does that recovery mean? Does that recovery mean he can do normal things, or does that recovery mean he can play competitive football in the second best league in the world for football?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you're completely right, because it just shows that, like, it's when it comes down to it with the ACL, the original strength of the ACL, you'd say, is at your 50 mark, and then the strength of your ACL like replacement is at 100, right? And when you get that replacement, when you get it recovered, fixed, and everything like that, it's gonna drop. Your ACL, that ACL graft they call it, is gonna be in the early healing stage. Then it goes to proliferation, which is a recovery process, and then it goes up to ligamentation, and that continues to increase throughout time. And through the 6 to 9 month mark, they say it could be even stronger than the actual normal ACL, your original ACL. Yeah, and so it's just one of those things that if Cam, it's just how does Cam's body react to that? It's just, if Cam Rising's body is accepting of that graft, and it's one of those things where it's recovering properly, he could be ready by week 1 in the next 2.5 weeks, or he might not be ready till week 4. It's such an interesting thing.
That's kind of my thought process. Another reason I think he'll play, I don't think he'll be fully recovered, to be completely honest with you. I'm not sure we're going to see the running game that we've seen previously. But if he doesn't play week 1, at what point do you bring him back? The recovery process is so gradual at that point. Is 1 week going to make that much of a difference? Is 2? Is 3? Is 4? Is it going to be any different than the previous? Like, I just feel like he's reaching the point where it's going to be tender, definitely. It's still in the healing process, but it's probably like 90% as healed as it's ever going to be. And so I think that he will play on it.
That's funny, because that was like one of my thought process for why he might not play.
Yeah.
Where like if 3 weeks out, or less than 3 weeks out right now, he's not even able to go full go, like how much is that 3 weeks going to help him? Mm-hmm. Like that was like kind of my thought. So it's interesting that we have the same thought, but like kind of on different sides.
Yeah, well, I definitely see your side of it too, because if he's not ready for full contact right now, is he going to even get that much better by week 1?
Yeah, well, he has like 12 days. It is the cutoff date for him to be ready for contact. Like, what's going to happen in 12 days to drastically change where he's at right now? Because he has to be ready at least 1 week before the game. That's what Coach Witt has said. That is the drop dead date, where if he's not ready 1 week before, they have to prep their backup, because you have to start installing your scheme. You just can't. You can't wait any longer.
I think also that you got to bring up the fact, like, what does Cam want to do? We don't know, obviously. I think at this point it's going to be on him. If he wants to play week 1, which by any indicator in the past, I think he will want to. I think at this point in his recovery, I think it's got to be up to him. That's in my eyes, at least, because like Landon said, if it's 90% and Cam Rising feels like he can go and he can compete for a team at 90% on that knee, like I say, give him the ball and let him do his thing. But obviously, we've seen in the past, Kyle Whittingham is very reluctant to do stuff like that because it isn't just.
I don't know if he's that reluctant to do stuff like that, to be completely honest with you. I mean, Rising played injured last year. Kincaid played injured last year.
That's a good point.
I think he lets the players decide, to be honest with you. I think that if a player says they're good to go, I think Witt trusts them with that.
I think the medical staff factors heavily into this. I think it's more than you guys are thinking. I think that they're going to give their recommendation.
Well, of course, yeah.
Yeah, like ultimately, the medical staff can't stop him or anything, but like they're going to give their recommendation, and I would be pretty surprised if Witt didn't follow their recommendation.
I think it's at that point in recovery where I think it's truly up to Cam. I think Cam can make that. If Cam can make a decision. I don't know, like if it's not up to him, if his recovery isn't to that point, that's where like I don't know. But in my eyes, what I think might be the case with it being 8 months out, he could be ready to be his decision, but it can definitely be different.
Okay, let's move a little bit into the battle for QB2, which Witt said was by far the most important thing to happen in training camp. Obviously, Brandon Rose was leading throughout the spring, leading throughout the summer, and still leading in fall camp, according to Coach Whittingham. But in the most recent scrimmage on Thursday, he suffered a pretty significant injury that, by all accounts, is going to knock him out for weeks, if not a couple months. So I think that while Rose was leading, he's not going to be ready to play. So I think that it's probably down to Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson for QB2. What are your guys' thoughts on this competition?
Man, I mean, if you looked on Utah football Twitter, it's all anyone's talking about. It is the topic because it's so critical. We have no idea if Cam's healthy. I think a lot of Utah fans are feeling pretty good going into the first 2 weeks if Cam's healthy. I can't name many Utah fans who are feeling great about our team if Cam's not healthy going into the first 2 weeks. It's a double-edged sword with this QB2 battle. You either go with Bryson Barnes. We've seen what Bryson is. His ceiling's not very high, but at the same time, he's not going to make a lot of plays to win the game, but he probably won't throw more than 1 or 2 interceptions at the very worst, like 1 or 2 turnovers. And then you have Nate Johnson now. He's someone who definitely could make a lot of plays to win you the game. But at the same time, would I be that surprised if he threw 3 interceptions against Florida were he to play? I can't say that I would be. So it's a double-edged sword. For me, I want to go with the upside, so I would go with Nate and just lean on the run game versus Florida and Baylor. But I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it.
Well, we know that like with Bryson Barnes as our starting quarterback, it's going to be a run-heavy offense.
I think why not anyone other than Cam, it's going to be run-heavy.
Well, exactly. If we know that, why not go for the better runner, the more athletic player, the guy that has the better upside, the younger player, and Nate Johnson?
To play devil's advocate a little bit, maybe what the team needs is just someone to kind of be a game manager and just like settle the team down and get into the run game. Just
but here's the thing. If I kind of agree with Ethan, if we're only going to run, wouldn't you want to put in the QB who is also a threat to run? Like if you're not going to throw very often and you're not going to really give full control of the offense to the QB regardless, like wouldn't you want the more dangerous runner as the quarterback? But I do see your point about, kind of poise and calm where Bryson's played in, some pretty big games, the Rose Bowl twice, obviously. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't get bigger than that. And so,
exactly.
Yeah, like maybe he has that poise, but I just feel like if you're going to run, like why not make your QB a threat to run as well? Don't make it so easy to guard. Don't let him stack the box and just take out the gaps, make him think a little bit, make the defensive end react to Nate Johnson, make him make a choice whether to go after the ball handler or whether to go after the running back.
Yeah, I mean, I think this situation is the definition. You're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly.
It's just, I can't feel great about either choice. Like, I love Nate Johnson's upside. Like, I'm addicted to that dream of having, like, the fastest 100-meter sprinter in California as our quarterback. Like, I am addicted to that and that idea. But at the same time, I'm so worried. He threw a bad pick in the spring game. I know, small sample size. But, dude, with that athleticism, there must be some problems in the passing game for him not to be the clear QB number 2.
Oh, I think that's guaranteed. If he had the same level of throwing game as Bryson Barnes, like he would be the obvious QB number 2.
Easily. I mean, why in the world would you ever have Bryson over him if Nate had the same throwing ability? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so the fact that he's not the clear number 2 shows that he doesn't, or at least the coaches don't think he does, which makes you really nervous because, I mean, we've seen what Bryson's throwing ability is. I mean, probably the best game for him would be 175 yards and a TD and no turnovers. That's
about the top end of what he's going to
perform. That's the top, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the fact that it's close shows us that Nate is probably way behind in the throwing game.
Yeah. I was really high on Brandon Rose. I'll be honest. I actually felt pretty good going into week 1 if Brandon Rose was going to be quarterback.
I did too. He has a big arm. He's accurate. He can move around. He was kind of a good mix between Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes.
He was athletic enough to scramble and avoid sacks, and he probably he's the best passer out of the 3 of them, I would go ahead and say.
Yeah, he probably has the biggest arm on the team. I think he's got a bigger arm than Rising does.
Rising he can doesn't throw probably have a particularly huge arm.
Yeah, and so I was looking forward to a game plan if we didn't have Rising where we would mostly pound the rock, take a few deep shots, kind of risk-free plays. And I don't think that either other quarterback really allows you to do that to the level Rose would have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so overall,
I think this dynamic of Nate Johnson, for me, obviously, if Bryson Barnes is showing out in practice, obviously Witt and Ludwig are going to go with the guy that they have more trust in. But even if Bryson Barnes is showing off in practice, we see what he's done in games. We've seen in game time play with him against big opponents, and then opponents that were not your the best games. But it's just one of those things where at this point I know what Bryson Barnes can give us. He can give us a decent game, 150 yards in the air with measly, not the most awe-inspiring plays. But I feel like Nate Johnson can give us 150 yards on the ground with 200 yards in the air pretty regularly. Maybe not that much. That's a little insane.
I've made up my mind on this a little bit. We have to play to win instead of playing to not lose. We have to start Nate, I think.
I agree.
I don't think we will. But how Utah, for so long, how we blocked ourselves from the Pac-12 championship, how we blocked ourselves from the college football playoff once in 2019, those are the definitions of playing not to lose.
Yeah.
I think that is Coach Whittingham's not to lose.
Yeah, that's Coach Whittingham's biggest trouble, I think.
Yes.
He wants to minimize mistakes. Oh, for sure. Yeah, he wants to minimize mistakes, play a clean game, but sometimes you have to take risks. He doesn't love taking risks. I don't think he wants to be able to control everything. And so it's definitely a weakness of his coaching.
Yeah, it's like, Witt's ideal game is probably like 28-10, 0 turnovers. You forced 1 or 2 turnovers. You ran for like 250 plus yards. Your quarterback threw 75% completion percentage, like 150 yards.
Yeah, your QB was 13 of 15 for 175 yards and a touchdown. And so
you see that switch kind of changed for Utah when Cam Rising became quarterback in 2021. They took the ball. Instead of deferring it on kicks, they chose to receive it, and we went away from that again last year. And we've talked about it a little bit in our previous podcasts in the last year or so, but we need to get back to that. Utah needs to take the ball and put their foot on the gas and not let go, especially with the departure in the pack. We need to kind of show off, like, hey, we are this. We are him. That's like who we are. Look at us.
Yeah. Okay. If you had to start the game tomorrow, who would you want to be the quarterback if Rising can't go, and who do you think would be the quarterback? I'm sure we'll all have the same answer for this. I I would want it to be Nate Johnson, but I'm 90% sure it would be Bryson Barnes.
For me, if it's who I want it to be other than Rising, I would want it to be Brandon Rose. Which is like maybe he does recover somehow. Maybe the injuries aren't super bad.
Yeah.
I think it would be Bryson, though.
Is there an option to kind of have like a Joe Williams type of quarterback situation come in? Hey, like, hey, bro, like, get somebody out of retirement.
Drew Lisk. Drew Lisk. You know? I was about to say, you better not say Drew Lisk, bro.
I mean, he saved our bacon in that Wazoo game.
Hear me out. Maybe, actually. Just think about it. Bentley sucked. Mr. Jacob Bentley. That dude was trash. Drew Lisk. He came in and got us that W. Could he produce one or two more for the University of Utah? Dude, I think I would feel okay going against Florida with Drew Lisk.
Did Jason Shelley ever finish degree? Did his degree? Did he come enroll for a game?
You have a point.
Well, Jason Shelley still plays college football for Missouri State.
Yeah.
Transfer real quick,
dude.
Yeah, I bet Witt would take him back with open arms. I mean, that dude's a beast.
I would take him back with open arms. He's one of my favorite players ever at Utah.
Yeah,
saved us that BYU game. But to kind of go to be a little less jokey about it, who I want, I'm in the same boat as Landon. I'd want Brandon Rose, but within his future, with his future undetermined, I'll say I want Nate Johnson. Honestly, I'll just kind of play devil's, kind of be a little different here. I think Nate Johnson will start. I think Utah will kind of see where we're coming from as well. Obviously, they're not listening to us, but they'll kind of have that perspective. And they'll decide to play big and try to hit the jackpot with someone like Nate if Cam and Brandon Rose can't run.
I won't lie. The whole smoke screen and not saying anything does get frustrating because Brandon Rose goes down and then all I hear is well, Nate Johnson had a really great practice yesterday, and it's oh my gosh.
Yeah,
guys,
it does seem like a smoke screen, doesn't it?
This is getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's there's all this smoke about Brandon Rose the day he gets injured. The next day, Nate Johnson just had an amazing practice. Oh, wow. It's okay. Let's be
really
serious
setting up
here.
For Bryson, you know?
Yeah, it's just are either of these guys, is anyone really even in contention? Is there even a quarterback battle going on?
No one could really say, truthfully.
I couldn't tell you.
I'd
wager they already know who the QB2 is.
It's a pretty big indictment on the staff, though. If it's been 3 season years, 2021, 2022, 2023, and Barnes is still the backup. I think that's
and he's not even on scholarship.
Yeah.
How have we not gotten someone better than him yet?
I think that's a pretty big indictment of the coaching staff because that's their whole job.
Surely
is
not.
To get players that are on scholarship to be the backup QB. How have they not done that? They've had 3 seasons to do that now.
Surely not. It's so horrific. I don't even want to believe it. How have we done this? How is this happening? Man.
Can Isaac Wilson come early and roll and play
early enrollment, boys?
Yeah.
Skip
5
his senior
touchdowns,
year.
300 yards. Good enough for me. You're on the team.
Yeah. Okay, well, any final thoughts, or should we close out this podcast?
My only final thoughts is if we don't win this Florida game, don't expect to hear from me for a month at least. I'll be in a deep depression.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to talk about a little bit the idea of the Holy War coming back. I just want to hear you guys' thoughts on that and kind of seeing what your thoughts on Utah playing BYU on a regular basis again come 2024.
I mean, it'll be good for the team down south to have the most important game in their program's history back again. It's really all that their program is competing for each year, and that's the way it's been for the past few decades. So good for BYU for sure. For us, it's just another mid to low tier Power 5 team. So we'll keep doing what we've been doing. I would expect probably 9 out of 10 going forward. But it'll be fun to play
at least for the next 10 years for sure. I'm not really that excited about it. I've never really enjoyed the game. It just feels like a game that just sucks the soul out of the rest of the season, where there's almost no upside to even winning that game. But there's a huge downside because you have to deal with BYU fans more frequently. And so to me, it's kind of a game with no positives and a lot of negatives.
Exactly.
So I am a little, I'm a little disappointed that game is coming back, but we know it's going to be on the schedule every year. The Big 12 is not going to let that one go. So we'll play it how it stands. And yeah, like Landon, I expect probably quite a few wins.
I like to. I want to bring something up. I think it's a big benefit for Utah if that game is played in November. As we see, it's a grueling schedule for having a whole Power 5 schedule all year long, not playing cupcakes week 10. And I think Utah having the chance to take that depth and go play the boys down south come Thanksgiving Day.
I mean, BYU's recruiting, it's never going to be able to catch up to like a high Power 5 level just because of cultural and different factors playing into BYU and Provo and that entire recruiting scene. I think that, and especially next year, I think that come November at the end of the season, BYU will be one of the worst Power 5 teams in the entire country. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they finished last in the Big 12. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, they're going to have to break in a new quarterback after Slovis leaves after this year. Their talent and depth just is not that great. I don't think they're really ready for a P5 schedule, which isn't surprising because it's a whole different ballgame, you know, playing week in and week out with no kind of glorified bye weeks in the middle of that.
And that play away games instead of 9 home games a year. So, I mean, I think 5 wins is their ceiling, 0 wins is their floor.
They'll never get 0 because they'll always schedule a couple easy out of conference ones.
I think they are the easy out of conference at this point.
Maybe for other Power 5s, but they'll beat the FCS teams. Everyone beats the FCS teams.
I mean, UMass, Liberty. I don't know. I mean,
I mean, those are not FCS though. Those are both FBS. Oh well, UMass might be FCS now, but I think they were FBS at the time.
I'm just saying, it's possible.
Yeah, I'm excited to continue to talk about the Big 12 here in the near future and talk about college football. So will be fun, boys.
Yeah, well, let's end the podcast there. We'll be back to you next week with probably another update on the QB2 battle, maybe looking a little bit ahead to Florida. They just announced that Graham Mertz is their starter. Maybe we'll start getting into a little bit of game prep for them. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, comment. We answer all your comments. We want to hear what you have to say. And yeah, any suggestions for what you'd like to see us do a podcast on or what you'd like to see us make a video on, please drop those below. Okay, go Utes.
Go Utes.